My husband said, my mom insists hand over your bonus. She deserves it more. I smiled, pulled out my phone and said, then you'll love this call from HR. His face went pale as my boss's voice said, we need to talk about your access to her account and your resignation package. I never imagined that something as straightforward as my work bonus would be the breaking point of my marriage. But then again, I never imagined that the man I loved would turn out to be someone I didn't recognize anymore. The signs were always there. Little things that I ignored, excused or convinced myself weren't as bad as they seemed. Maybe if I had paid closer attention, I wouldn't have been so blindsided. Maybe I would have seen it coming, but I didn't. And that Tuesday when I walked through the front door, exhausted from a long day at work, I had no idea my life was about to change forever. The house was quiet except for the sound of the television playing in the background. I could hear muffled voices. Probably one of those daytime talk shows my mother-in-law, Margene, loved to watch. I sighed, slipping off my heels and setting my bag down by the door. It had been a long day. A good day, but long. My boss had called me into his office that morning, congratulated me on my performance, and handed me the official paperwork confirming my annual bonus. It wasn't a fortune, but it was substantial enough to pay off a chunk of our mortgage, cover some upcoming expenses, and maybe if I was careful, put a little aside for myself. I had worked hard for it, harder than anyone needs. Late nights, early mornings, taking on extra projects when no one else was. Missing birthdays, holidays, and weekends while my husband Jake spent his free time with his friends or watching TV. I had sacrificed sleep, peace and time, but it had all been worth it. Or so I thought. As I walked into the living room, I spotted Jake sitting at the kitchen table. His phone was in his hand, his thumb scrolling lazily over the screen. Across from him, Margene was sipping tea, her expression unreadable but sharp. I hesitated. There was something about the way they were sitting. Like they had just finished a conversation they didn't want me to hear. I forced a smile. Hey, I greeted. Walking toward the kitchen. How was your day? Jake barely looked up. Fine. Margene sat her teacup down with a little too much force, the ceramic clinking against the saucer. Eventful, she added, watching me closely. I frowned but didn't act. Instead, I made my way to the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water and taking a long sip. I wasn't in the mood for whatever mood Margene was in today. Jake finally set his phone down. So he said, his voice careful. Anything interesting happened at work today? I hesitated. The way he asked was too casual. Like he already knew something. I glanced at him. Then at Margene, who had folded her hands neatly in front of her like she was waiting for a response. My stomach tightened, but I shrugged it off. Actually, yeah, I said, deciding not to overthink it. I got my bonus today. There was a beat of silence. Then Jake's eyes flickered toward Margene. A quick exchange, almost imperceptible. And that's what I knew. They already knew about the bonus. I felt my grip tighten around the bottle, a slow dread creeping in. I set the water down on the counter. What? I asked. My voice sharper than I intended. Margene cleared her throat, adjusting the silk scarf she always wore around her neck. Well, dear, she began. Her tone coated in fake sweetness. We were actually just talking about your bonus. I stared at her. Then at Jake, you were talking about my bonus. Jake leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, like this was some kind of business negotiation. Look, it's not a big deal. We were just thinking about how, Mom's been struggling lately. I blinked. Margene sighed dramatically. The house repairs. My car needing work. The medical bills. Jake nodded along, as if he'd been coached. She's on a fixed income. It's been tough for her. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. What exactly are you saying? Jake tilted his head. His voice easy. We think it'd be fair if you gave her the bonus. I felt the words before I fully processed them. Gave her the bonus. Not a part of it. Not alone. The whole thing. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air heavier. Margene was watching me. Her lips pursed, like she was already preparing for my refusal. I set the bottle down. You can't be serious. Jake frowned. Babe, come on. I shook my head. No, absolutely not. Margene scoffed. You're being selfish. Selfish. I let out a short, humorless laugh. I worked for this. I earned this. And you think I should just hand it over? Jake sighed. Like I was the unreasonable one. It's not about handing it over. It's about helping family. I took a step back. My mind raced. Jake, do you even hear yourself? You're telling me that I should give my entire bonus to your mom while we have our own bills to pay. Our own responsibilities. Marjean's tone turned sharp. Oh, please. You two are fine. It's not like you need it. I turned to Jake. This is a joke, right? His jaw tightened. Babe, no. I cut him off. Let me get this straight. Your money is yours. My money is also yours. And apparently now it's also your mother's. Neither of them said anything. I let out a slow breath, pressing my fingers against my temples. My hands were shaking. And then something clicked. How did you even know about my bonus? I asked quietly. Jake shifted in his seat. What? I lifted my eyes to his. I didn't tell you about it yet. So how did you know? Marjean's expression remained neutral. But something flickered across Jake's face. It was quick. But I saw it. And that's when I knew Jake had gone through my work emails, my financial records, and suddenly I wasn't just angry. I was done. Silence filled the room. Then without breaking eye contact, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Jake frowned. What are you doing? I smiled. A cold, empty smile. Oh, I said, pressing dial, just making a call. The phone rang. Then after a beat, my boss's voice came through the speaker. Hello. Jake's face paled. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely in control. For a moment, no one moved. Jake's fingers tightened around his phone. Marjean's lips parted slightly, but she didn't say anything. I could feel the tension between us like a thick, invisible wall. Then my boss's voice came through the speaker again. Hello. Are you there? I cleared my throat, keeping my eyes locked on Jake's. Hey, it's me. Quick question. Do we have any security concerns regarding unauthorized access to my work accounts? A long pause. Then my boss's voice sharpened. What happened? Jake shot up from his seat, his chair scraping against the tile floor. What the HLL are you doing? I ignored him. My pulse was racing, but I kept my voice steady. I just realized that someone in my household might have been looking at my emails and financial records without my knowledge. Jake's face drained of color. Babe, stop. Hang up the phone. Marjean's expression tightened. Oh, for God's sake, don't be dramatic. But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being clear. My boss exhaled slowly and spoke carefully. That's serious. We might need to discuss this further. Let's meet first thing in the morning. Of course, I said lightly. I'll be in early. Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You're really doing this? Over STPI bonus? My boss spoke again, his tone suddenly shifting. Actually, while I have you, Jake, we need to talk about something. I didn't miss the way Jake flinched. What? A beat of silence. Then HR has been reviewing some things regarding your access to certain company systems. We'll be having a meeting tomorrow to go over it. Jake took a step forward, his voice rising. What the HLL does that mean? But I knew what it meant. And so did he. It meant that HR had been watching him. That his little habit of snooping where he didn't belong wasn't just a problem at home. It was a problem at work, too. I let the silence hang in the air before speaking. My voicey. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. I ended the call. Jake stared at me, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. His anger wasn't loud. Not yet. But I could see it bubbling beneath the surface, barely contained. Then, slowly, he turned to Marjan. His mother, his biggest offender, his enabler. But for the first time since I had known them both, she had nothing to say. Marjan sat stiffly in her chair, her mouth pressed into a thin line, her eyes flickered toward the phone in my hand. Then back to Jake. She understood. This wasn't going the way they had expected. I wasn't backing down. And now there were consequences. Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. He was scrambling, searching for a way to turn this around, to regain control. Babe, he said, forcing a weak smile. Come on. Let's not do this. It's just money. My jaw tightened. Exactly. It's my money. Marjan scoffed, shaking her head. Unbelievable. After everything I've done for this family, my voice came out sharper than I intended. But I didn't care. Marjan, I'm not your personal bank. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. And Jake, I continued, my voice steady but cold. We need to talk. Alone. Marjan tensed. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of me. I met her gaze without flinching. No, I can't. She hesitated, glancing toward Jake, but he didn't speak. For once, he didn't know what to say. Marjan let out an exaggerated sigh and stood up, adjusting her scarf like she was some kind of wronged queen. Fine, she snapped, grabbing her purse. But don't expect me to sit here and listen to your nonsense when you come crawling back begging for forgiveness. I didn't respond. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. And just like that, it was quiet again. Jake rubbed his hands over his face. Jesus Christ. I crossed my arms, watching him. Sit down. He didn't move at first. But then, after a long drawn-out pause, he sat. The weight of everything settled between us. There was so much I wanted to say. So many things I had ignored, excused or justified over the years. But now, all I could think about was one simple truth. I wasn't angry because of the money. I was angry because I finally saw him for who he really was. And I didn't like what I saw. Jake sighed, shaking his head. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but firm. Did you go into my work accounts? He hesitated. Just for a second, that was all I needed. I nodded slowly, the final confirmation settling in my chest like a stone. I didn't steal anything, he muttered. But you were going to. Jake exhaled sharply. Oh my God, you're acting like I robbed a bank. I tilted my head. If I went into your accounts without asking, would you be okay with that? His jaw twitched. That's different. Why? Because he stopped. Struggling for an answer. Then finally he said, because I'm your husband. I let the word settle between us. So that's it. I asked softly. You think that just because we're married, my money automatically belongs to you? His silence told me everything. I swallowed down the lump in my throat. Wow. Jake sighed, shaking his head like I was the one being unreasonable. Babe, look, I just thought, no, I cut him off. You didn't think. You assumed I'd just roll over and say, yes, you assumed I'd given like I always do. He didn't argue because he knew I was right. And that was the hardest part of all, the realization that I had let this happen, that somewhere along the way, I had allowed him to believe he could treat me like this, but not ever again. Jake ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. So what now? I held his gaze, steady and unflinching. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I think he realized that he had finally pushed me too far. Jake sat there staring at me, his knee bouncing under the table. The air between us had shifted. He knew he had pushed too far, but I could see in his face that he wasn't sure just how much trouble he was really in. Not yet. I took a slow breath, letting the silence settle between us, letting him feel it, the weight of it. Then finally I spoke. You went into my account, Jake exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. Jesus were still on, ignored the way my stomach twisted at his dismissive tone. I wasn't letting him brush this off. I trusted you, I said quietly, and you went behind my back. Jake rubbed a hand over his face, groaning, for God's sake, I didn't even take anything, but you were going to shut him up. His legs stopped bouncing. His fingers, which had been drumming lightly on the table, went still. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Jake let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. So what? You're going to act like I'm some kind of criminal now. Like I stole from you. I tilted my head. Jake, let's be real. If I hadn't caught you, would you have told me? He hesitated. Just for a second. But that second was everything. I sat back. Right. Jake's hands curled into fists on the table. You're blowing this out of proportion. No. My voice was calm. Measured. I'm finally seeing things for what they are. He let out a harsh breath, standing up so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly against the tile. This is insane. I watched as he ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth like he was the victim in all of this. Like he was the one who had been blindsided. Finally he turned to me. Arms crossed over his chest. What do you want from me? I let that question hang in the air because the truth was I didn't know anymore. I used to know. I used to want us, the version of us that I thought we were. The version of us I had convinced myself still existed. But now all I could see was a man who had no problem going behind my back. A man who thought so little of me, of my hard work, that he believed my money was automatically his to give away. And worse, he didn't even feel vowed about it. Jake sighed when I didn't answer. Look, let's just drop it. All right, it's done. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. I almost laughed. Nothing happened because I caught him before it could. I pressed my fingers against my temples. My pulse pounding. Jake, I said slowly, have you done this before? His head snapped up. What? I swallowed. My throat suddenly dry. Have you taken money from me before? His reaction told me everything. The slight flicker in his expression. The way his mouth parted like he wanted to deny it, but knew I wouldn't believe him. I felt like the air had been escaped out of my lungs. Oh my God. Jake groaned, rubbing his hands over his face. Babe, stop. How much? My voice barely sounded like my own. How much have you taken? Jake shook his head. It's not like that. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My legs felt unsteady beneath me. Like what? He exhaled sharply. I borrowed some money here and there. Borrowed? He rolled his eyes. Oh, don't act like you would have even noticed. Something inside me snapped. Don't act like I would have noticed. My voice trembled with anger. Are you serious right now? Jake had the nerve to look annoyed. Oh, come on. He muttered. It's not like you ever struggled because of it. I felt my stomach twist. The sheer entitlement in his voice. The complete lack of remorse. I had been KLNG myself at work, taking on extra hours, late nights, skipped vacations. Meanwhile, my own husband had been dipping into my money behind my back, acting like it was his right to do so. Acting like I was overreacting for being upset about it. I felt my breath shudder as I exhaled. So that's it then. That's what you think of me? Jake threw his hands up. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry. Fine. I'm sorry. The words meant nothing. They weren't even real. He wasn't sorry he had done it. He was sorry he had been caught. I swallowed down the lump in my throat, shaking my head. You're unbelievable. Jake scoffed. Yeah. Well, you're acting like a damn stranger right now. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. I'm the stranger. I gestured between us. Jake, I don't even know who you are anymore. He groaned, dragging a hand through his hair. Jesus. This is exhausting. I stared at him. You know what, Jake? You're right. He looked at me, frowning slightly. I swallowed. My throat thick with something I couldn't name. I am exhausted. I admitted. I'm exhausted of always being the responsible one. The one who works late. The one who plans ahead. The one who makes sure the bills are paid while you sit back and act like none of it matters. Jake's jaw clenched. That's not fair. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, fair. Now you care about fair. He didn't respond. I let the silence stretch between us, my heart pounding. Then I finally said it. I think I need to rethink some things. Jake's brows pulled together. What's that supposed to mean? I exhaled. It means I don't know if I can keep doing this. His face darkened. You're saying you want to end this, as if this was small, as if this was something that could be swept under the rug, as if this wasn't the final straw after years of quiet compromises of giving and giving while he took without a second thought. Jake shook his head. You don't mean that, but I did. And for the first time since this conversation started, I could see that he finally understood just how much trouble he was really in. For the first time, I saw the flicker of fear in his expression. Good. He should be afraid. Because for the first time in our marriage, he was about to learn what it felt like to lose something he thought would always be there. Jake was staring at me like he had just realized I was serious. Like it had never once occurred to him that I might actually walk away. Good. Maybe it was time he finally understood that I wasn't some bottomless well of patience and forgiveness. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me into backing down. Not this time. He scoffed, running both hands over his face. Jesus, you're really doing this. I crossed my arms. I have to. Jake let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Wow. Over a bonus. I blinked at him. You really think this is about the bonus? He shrugged, like he couldn't be bothered to care. That's what set you off, isn't it? I let out a sharp exhale, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't just about the bonus, Jake. This is about everything. It's about the fact that you don't respect me. You don't respect my work, my time, or my money. His expression darkened. Oh, don't start with that respect crap. I ignored him, pressing forward. It's about the fact that you don't see a problem with what you did, that you knew it was wrong and did it anyway. His jaw tensed, but he didn't interrupt. So no, I continued. This isn't about STP ad bonus. It's about trust. And I don't think I trust you anymore. Something flickered across his face, panic. He masked it quickly, but I saw it and deep down, I think he knew. This was different. I wasn't just angry. I was done. Jake let out a slow breath, as if he was trying to rein in his frustration. He leaned forward, planting his hands on the table. So what? You're saying you want a divorce? The word hung between us, heavy and unspoken. I swallowed hard. I hadn't said it out loud yet, but God, I had been thinking it for longer than I wanted to admit. I shifted my weight, gripping the edge of the chair so tightly my knuckles ached. I don't know yet. Jake exhaled sharply, shaking his head like I was being ridiculous. Come on, don't be dramatic. You're really going to blow up our marriage because of this. I stared at him. Jake, you blew up our marriage. He flinched, just slightly. That's not fair. I let out a humorless laugh. No. What's fair then? That I keep pretending everything is fine while you go behind my back. That I work myself into the ground while you and your mother scheme to take my money. Jake's eyes narrow. Don't bring my mom into this. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, so she wasn't sitting here, telling me I was selfish for not handing over my bonus? He didn't respond. I nodded. That's what I thought. Jake let out a slow measured breath. His tone softened like he was trying a different tactic. Look, babe, let's just take a step back. All right. Maybe we both just need to cool off. I tilted my head. Cool off. He nodded, slipping his hands into his pockets. Like this was a casual disagreement instead of the unraveling of our marriage. Yeah, you're mad. I get it, but you don't want to make any rash decisions. I stared at him, something inside me snapping into place. That was it. That was the problem. Jake still thought this was temporary, that this was just another fight, another argument I'd cool down from. He still thought he could wait me out. I let out a breath, slow and measure. You really think I'm just going to get over this, don't you? Jake's jaw tightened. I think you're overreacting. I scoffed, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Jake took a step toward me, lowering his voice like he was trying to reason with a child. Babe, we've been through worse. I frowned. Have we? He hesitated and that told me everything. Because no, we hadn't. Sure, we'd had our fair share of fights. STP ADI arguments over bills or schedules or me working too much. But this wasn't a fight. This was a betrayal. Jake sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Look, can we not do this right now? I exhaled sharply. Then when Jake, when would be a good time for me to call you out for stealing from me? His eyes flashed with irritation. I didn't steal from you. I crossed my arm. You went into my work emails without permission. You went into my accounts behind my back. What exactly would you call it? Jake's mouth pressed into a thin line. He didn't have an answer for that. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocate. And then finally, he let out a bitter chuckle. You really think you're better than me, huh? I stiffened. Excuse me? His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You love this, don't you? Getting to stand there and act all high and mighty, like you're some perfect little angel. I blinked at him. What? He scoffed. Oh, don't play dumb. You love holding this over my head. Makes you feel powerful, doesn't it? My stomach twisted. Jesus, Jake, do you even hear yourself? His jaw clenched. I hear you loud and clear. I swallowed hard. My pulse thudding in my ear. He wasn't sorry. Not even a little bit. If anything, he was angry at me. Like I was the one who had betrayed him. I took a slow step back. Wow. Jake exhaled, shaking his head. Yeah. Wow. I felt something in my chest tighten. So that's how you see me, as some kind of power-hungry control freak. He didn't answer. And that was worse than anything he could have said. I let out a slow, shuddering breath. I think we need some space. Jake's head snapped up. What? I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I need you to leave for a while. His expression darkened. Are you kidding? I shook my head. I'm not. Jake let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. Jesus Christ, you're really serious about this? I didn't respond. Because yeah, I was. For the first time in years, I was dead serious. Jake stared at me for a long moment. Then finally he exhaled sharply and turned away. Fine. He muttered. He grabbed his keys off the counter, stuffing them into his pocket. He moved toward the door, hesitated for half a second, then glanced back at me. You're making a mistake. I didn't respond. Because maybe I had made a mistake. Maybe I had made it the moment I said I do. Jake scoffed when I didn't reply. Unbelievable. Then he yanked the door open, stepping outside. And just like that, he was gone. I stood there staring at the closed door, my heart pounding. For years, I had been waiting for something to change. And now I realized that change had to start with me. The silence after Jake left wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, thick with everything unsaid. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, letting it all sink in. Then without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and started making calls. First, I called my bank. I secured my accounts, changed my passwords and flagged any suspicious activity. I wanted a full record of every transaction linked to Jake just in case. Next, I called my boss. I had worked too damn hard to let my personal life jeopardize my professional reputation. So I explained the situation, not in every gritty detail, but just enough. Thank you for letting me know, my boss said after a long pause. I assumed you'll want me to formally block his access to anything tied to your work. Yes, I said firmly, I'll take care of it. I hung up, exhaling slowly, one step at a time. Jake didn't come home that night, or the next. And honestly, that was fine by me. But what wasn't fine was the message I got from him 3 days later. Jake, hey, let's talk. I stared at my screen, my fingers twitching. He wanted to talk. Now suddenly, after I had taken control of everything, I debated ignoring him. But no, I wanted this conversation. So I replied, come by at 6, we'll talk. Jake showed up at exactly 6, looking frustrated, but composed. He had that confident, sticky air about him, the one he always wore when he thought he could talk his way out of something. He stepped inside, glancing around. So you calmed down yet? I raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to start with that? He let out a breath. Look, I get it. You're mad. You think I crossed a line. You did cross a line. His jaw clenched. Fine. Whatever. Can we just move past this? I let out a small laugh. Move past this? Jake sighed. Come on, babe, we've been together too long to throw it all away over money. I studied him for a moment. You really don't get it, do you? He shrugged. I get that you're blowing this out of proportion. That was it. The final confirmation that there was nothing left to salvage here. I took a slow breath and pulled out a folder from the counter. All right, then, let's move forward. I split it across the table toward him. Jake frowned, glancing down at it. What's this? Separation papers. His head snapped up. Are you serious? I nodded. Completely. He scoffed, flipping through the papers. This is ridiculous. You're actually ending things over this? I crossed my arms. No, I'm ending things because I finally realized you will never respect me. Jake let out a bitter laugh. Wow. So that's it, huh? You just give up. I tilted my head. You had no problem giving up on being a decent husband. His face darkened, but I wasn't done. I leaned against the counter. My voice calm. I spoke to HR, by the way. They flagged your access. And since you tried to get into my work accounts without authorization, that's a huge problem. Jake's face paled. What? I smiled. They're reviewing your employment. And from what I hear, it's not looking good. Jake swallowed hard. I didn't do anything. Jake, you did. He stared at me, stunned. Like he had never once considered that there would be consequence. I let out a breath, picking up the papers and sliding a pen toward him. Sign it. He didn't move. I leaned in slightly. Or, don't. But just so you know, my lawyer is ready to move forward either way. Jake's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. But he knew he had left. After a long tense silence, he grabbed the pen and scrawled his name at the bottom. Then he tossed it down on the table. You're making a mistake. I picked up the papers, tucking them neatly into the folder. No. I'm finally making the right choice. Jake exhaled sharply, shaking his head. He grabbed his keys, shot me one last glare, and walked out the door. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to chase after him. Because I knew, without a doubt, that I wasn't the one losing anything. He was. And deep down, I think he finally knew it too.
Good morning， 早安，妈妈们。借我你那个麦试一下。你们收到了这个 Oxford Dictionary Pen 没有啊 ？e-Camus 就是上次 Kobe Daddy 跟这个 e-Camus 配合，然后开卖的这个 e-Camus。这个 e-Camus 我自己呢也有买一套给我的孩子，然后呢我也买一套送给。